What up,
Jeez,
Tom?
Tom.
How are you guys?
Good, buddy. How you doing?
Good, man. We're busy. I'm sure you guys are as well.
You got the fridge cigarette going on here, the knockoff fridge cigarette.
Yeah, I should probably drink some water at some point in my life, but it's not going to be today.
All right, well, we've had the pleasure of talking to you privately a couple times as we've been fascinated with internet capital markets and some of the downsides that have sort of emerged, and then the folks who are stepping out onto the timeline and the risk curve saying, hey, we have a solution for it. And the core, at least the category I put you guys in, is saying, hey, we probably need to tie these tokens to something that is meaningful, protectable, that allows us to benefit as token holders from the value that gets created in these business endeavors, rather than just the pure memetics. We started off this morning talking about Dupe and Bobby, who has a very different opinion than that, which is saying, hey, these two things are very different. So maybe you could just start off here by making the case for why you think tokens should have connection to the equity value of these companies.
Totally. I think value accrual in general, we've seen it for the past 5-6 years now, where these tokens are one form of value accrual, and then we have equity holders that accrue. Typically, if you look at Uniswap and some other models, right, the majority of that value. People are inherently greedy. I don't think they're inherently bad, but I think they're inherently greedy. And I think we have enough empirical evidence at this point to say that having two different forms of value accrual does not actually function well. We need to drive all the value back to one focused target. I think that the token in our model is the goal there. And then everything kind of works from there, right? And I think that the second thing is that when you have one single form or funnel of value, right, you can then enable teams to actually go and build out their business, versus what we've talked about, what I've been advised about, and what I've advised other people about is that when you're running this dual model where you have equity and a token, a lot of times you get lost in the sauce of, should I work on the token this week or should I work on the company, right? And like, that's not healthy in my book. It's not beneficial for token owners like the founders, because you get caught between two different things rather than just focusing on one solo funnel.
Is it your belief that these kind of equity linked tokens are going to be the killer model for ICM, or is this just one kind of important category among a few that are going to work for different stages and different types of projects?
I think that this is the winning model. I'm not going to say that our model is the winning model, but I think what MetaDAO is doing, right, with ownership tokens and things like that, we're all in the same kind of world. I think that the reality is, and what I try to tell people is that I've been in crypto a long time, but I've also been a Web2 founder, right? Ownership and equity have been around for ages. It works well, right? You know, shares and things like that work well in the real world. We don't need to change that, right? We're creating solutions for problems that don't exist, frankly.
Can you maybe articulate what the innovation is here from a legal and technical perspective that you guys are pushing forward?
Totally. So what we do is that we've realized that tokens typically for teams are for selling, right? You have a float outstanding on launch day. Sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher, but you have this FDV. That FDV inevitably hits the open market at some point, right? That's why we've seen some of these charts where, you know, the FDV continually goes up, but actually the value to token holders actually goes down, right? So you get diluted over time. In our model, we make it so that, number one, there is a tangible cost to actually selling tokens, right? And that tangible cost is a super senior debt against your company. That way there is a cost risk benefit or a cost value benefit to both sides of the coin. We usually recommend 5%, which is the super senior debt that is put into circulating supply. We cap the total debt against your company at 20% now. So that means that worst case, at 5% starting, the most you can be diluted by is 4x over time. But the second thing we add is, which is very similar to public markets, where if you're a CEO and you go to sell shares, you have to actually disclose that to the public market. We have a disclosure form and a disclosure period. So if you're a founder and you say, hey, we need to raise some capital, we need to put some tokens on the open market, you have to file a disclosure with us. That goes public to everyone. And then 72 hours later, you actually get your token sent to you. So we're trying to create this transparent environment where, number one, the team is not just using the token as a liquidity vessel to sell on people. Number two, buybacks are encouraged to reduce your debt, right? But we're startups. I'm a startup. A lot of these companies are startups. They can't just be using every free floating dollar they have in their ecosystem to buy back tokens on day one. the tangible utility of our model is that you have value in the company does well, you as a holder should benefit.
Is that cap something new? Because I feel like before you didn't have a full cap on the amount of debt that a team could take.
Correct. We spoke to the market a lot, spoke to a lot of participants. People were worried about the FDB being this like, oh, I'm going to get diluted by 20x, right? And the reality is that how much debt is healthy. We felt that 20% was a healthy amount of debt where we could say the company is still, functional, still operating, but they have the ability to also use this as a liquid market like it should.
It seems like a lot of kind of mental overhead for an early stage founder to kind of overcome. Like not only, do I have to understand what it means to take on debt, but also understand what it means to have a liquid token and all the challenges that come with that. So I'm interested in what your conversations with founders have been like, kind of where they get hung up, what the pushback is, and I guess the willingness to, take the gamble on kind of a new model like this.
So the majority of founders that we've spoken to, a lot of them are Web 2. So they actually understand this model because this debt model is very similar to like venture debt in a lot of ways, right? We have no interest. So it's an interest-free, non-dilutive debt structure. It's great for them because we win and our holders win when the company wins, right? The only time that debt is redeemed or called upon is going to be a liquidity event. So merger, IPO, acquisition. Our contract is structured like that. But they also have the ability to say, hey, listen, I'm not going to add all this friction to my app or my consumer product. I don't need to add utility to the token. The utility is that my company does well and you guys benefit down the road through buybacks by reducing the debt, number one, or alternatively, some type of acquisition, merger, or liquidity event in the future. So the conversations have been great. They've been very straightforward. We're selling them a model that they're pretty much used to, right? You don't sell all of your equity on day one. You don't sell all of your tokens on day one is kind of my mentality.
Are they excited about having liquid tokens? Like, I guess that's the newest piece then for them.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, a lot of people like the idea of going public earlier, right? So getting your token on the open market and having this liquid market. There's a lot of stresses with that, don't get me wrong. But what most people are absolutely thrilled about is a new way for them to raise a reasonable amount of capital. Like I said, for bridge rounds and things like that, sometimes you get stuck in between rounds and you need to persist a little bit longer. Our business model is perfect for that because you can go raise a little bit of capital, you give people exposure to your business if they like you, and then you can get to that next round, get to that merger, acquisition, et cetera.
I think the sort of the interesting thing here is some of the legal engineering that is going into this. I think we're seeing a number of teams kind of step out into this, I guess, awareness or belief that you're articulating here, which is at least need to be some sort of sense of ownership over these and contractual in some way. And when I look across the entire set there, I think there is sort of various legal structures people are running at. And the thing that's always in the back of my mind is just like, how do we balance off this, clear value, I would say, in pushing forward, the edges here. This is what crypto has done forever. And I think the reason we are today talking about, Market Structures Act, et cetera, is because of those risks that people took in the gray area versus like the real fundamental risks that exist. And I think it exists across MetaDAO, SOAR, Street is the other one that we've had on in the past, where none of these things have been truly tested. And, securities laws are securities laws out there. And so how do you think about balancing off that desire to innovate with like the practical desire to not expose token holders or companies to new risks?
Totally. So first and foremost, I'm an attorney. We have 25 years of legal experience on our team. So we definitely understand those risks a lot more than other people. This is basically my bar license, which I worked a long time for. And Sean also worked a very long time for. We look at it as something that our model, our business in general, and how it's structured, from transparency, disclosures, all of these things are directly modeled after public markets. They're directly modeled to benefit holders and retail, right? That's all these structures are for. They're actually driving more value back to them. Granted, like you said, there's some pseudo playing there. I think that we need to push forward consumer protection laws. I think we need to push forward the ability for people to get exposure to startups and early stage companies sooner in their life cycle. We put everything in place so that it's very transparent, very thorough, the DD process. Do I think it's a little bit risky? Absolutely. Do we understand those risks? Absolutely. Do I think it's justified and right that people are able to invest in these companies sooner? 100%. And I think that no different than when Uber, started running on the streets of New York, and eventually they became so big that you couldn't stop them and they had to change the laws. I think someone in this arena will end up doing the same exact thing, because the reality is that all of these other models that we came up with, whether they're utility tokens or governance tokens in the past, everyone's gotten burned. Like, they're not the solution, right? We need a new solution. I recommend that people look into this. I recommend that the government, and we're pushing on our end to get the government to do something and protect people better.
I don't think everybody's gotten burned. I mean, I think we clearly have some token models that have worked very well. And I think what is interesting is, we're still in this era of we kicked off the show today talking about token definitions and A16Z's desire to add, specific words and categories. And so we're still very much in that figuring out phase. But, the big news this week obviously was Uniswap making the fee switch going on.
Yep.
And I think articulating a what I think folks would call a network token value and the way that value can accrue. I think Aerodrome, again, a big announcement this week, and their specific VE token models, and of course, Hyperliquid, Pump.Fun, et cetera. And so I think it's not clear to me that equity is actually necessary here, or that maybe the way that these things might emerge is that there are two separate paths. And in fact, I think that's maybe what we've seen most prevalent this year, is that teams have recognized the value of having an equity entity and taking that public and having a token and having that on chain. And DATs sort of emerged from that a little bit as well. Yep. Circle and Arc with their token and utility. So I think it is very interesting. And I'm not sure where it ultimately lies, but it does feel like I think kind of critical on our last show about your first launch, because I'm trying to articulate this in a way that both holds sort of the excitement I have for pushing this model forward, and also a sense of awkwardness. I think that kind of came up for me, where there's sort of this mixture of saying, well, hey, there's something more real here, and then seeing something that I didn't think actually delivered on the more real here. It felt very vague and broadly represented rather than specific. And so there's sort of this sense of there should be either more detail. I wanted something more from this model that I clearly don't ask for in other models. And I don't know how to completely make sense of that. Maybe this is just because it's new and we're figuring it out, or maybe it's I guess my fear is that we end up in a situation where the TSX venture crew here, these a bunch of stockbrokers that are very comparing the engagement with ring sizes they're giving to their wives because they've been able to go sell equity to unsuspecting people. I don't want that to persist here.
Yeah, I guess
so. I don't know where I'm going with here. I feel like I just needed to say that because it's kind of
I'll put it to you this way. I obviously have spoke to you guys a bunch. Definitely respect y'all. I thought the comments were misguided at best. And the reason why I say that is never mind CPT. I can understand it's not for everyone, right? Not here to shill it. I think our team did a lot of DD on our end to make sure that this was a real company, make sure that they're very early stage, admittedly, but they're doing their best. And I think that if it works, even 10% right, it's a huge company. I think the more important thing is that at the end of the stream at some point, which, I guess I'd appreciate some clarification on, is this idea where if you don't raise from VC, you're essentially an illegitimate company. I think that is something that is a little bit misguided in my book.
That's not what I mean whatsoever. My critique of it was that that there was like zero information on their website. Very hard to find any of the founders.
Yep.
They're making very bold claims and giving demos that actually I don't think articulate the challenge in commercializing the market. And I'm not sure they fully represented I think they're sort of leaning into the vagueness to allow people to assume things that I think are actually not true. And so while I don't think there's anywhere near fraud or maybe to any even sort of explicit malice in it whatsoever, like I don't know these guys, etc. I felt that watching the stream and watching the demo and seeing the deck, and then even seeing the gentleman who's leading it and looking at his company, etc. There's zero information out there, and it raised so many red flags for me on that. And I think the only way you actually solve that is by talking to those guys. And I think, I give you guys, I need to put trust in you for having done that work. And I have no doubt that you would want to make sure that you're bringing good projects out to the world. And so I'm happy to do that. But it did feel like it was overrepresented in my mind. And it has nothing to do with whether VCs have a sense. I mean, I tweet all the time about it. I think that if you think that retail is dumb money, like, talk to some of these VCs. Like, this is just like we're chasing stuff in there. But I wanted more from it, and I also think that, like, the balance of there's a big difference between fraud and being very broad and slightly vague and misleading. And I felt like this was very much on the sort of the vague, and left me feeling like there was potentially misleading stuff here. So that's really where my comments came from.
Well, I think the huge challenge is we're now asking, like, obviously the opportunity in letting people participate in early stage startups is amazing, but we're also asking them to be early stage investors. So it's like, how do we bring people along the kind of due diligence ride, make sure they have all the information to make the right decisions? Obviously, you can't have thousands of people having one-on-one conversations with founders, but how do we make sure that their vision and background and why they're the right team to go after this opportunity is very, very clear, so they can actually make informed decisions? Because I think if they don't, then they're putting a lot of trust on SOAR and seeing you guys as the curator, trusting your diligence, and then if something goes wrong, your brand trust is destroyed, and kind of the opportunity you're running after is gone. So I think we're just kind of in this awkward middle ground where, like, how do we properly give early stage random internet people the appropriate information to go due diligence, but also recognizing that these early stage projects don't also want to give away all their secret sauce at the earliest stages.
It's a challenge.
It is a big challenge. And I think that the other thing that, like, I've spoke to a lot of people about just on this broader topic, right? And we all have this, like, PTSD, I guess, in crypto, right? We all have this feeling of just like, this has to be a scam. Like, how can this be true? And, like, to be honest with you, some of the stuff that we're talking to other companies right now, like, we're going to need to move away from that, because a lot of the stuff we're bringing is the dead opposite of a scam, right? These are companies that have run for 5-6 years, have tons of revenue. On day one, you might say, maybe they didn't give me enough information, but a lot of these companies are like consumer apps. So they're out there in the public. You can do your own DD. We need to get away from this mentality of, like, oh, this is too good to be true. Because if we keep preaching that, I think, to the broader world, right, no one real is ever going to come to this space and tokenize, because everyone's going to be like, well, they clearly said that, like, you can't be real because, you're too good to be true, right? I think that there are going to be opportunities in the next couple of years where things are incredible coming to this space and tokenizing for the first time. We need to give those teams support. Going back to CPT and such, I think that ultimately, I'm not a VC, don't claim to be. All I can say is I know and I can read people decently well, and I've met with all of our teams that are launching on the platform multiple times. Like, this is like 5-10 times, including in person with Impulsion multiple times. A bet on early stage is a bet on founders, right? It's a bet on nothing more than that. We never proclaimed to be, or they never proclaimed to be, this super late stage startup. They proclaim to be something that has a bunch of scientists, and they're more in the research stage of building out a product that can improve the world in a lot of ways, I think. And it's a bet on Patrick Seng. Like I said, it's a bet on their whole team. I trust Patrick. He's worked in public markets for a long time. That's kind of all I can say on it. It's on their side now to prove out the product and prove out the model. But that's kind of
I like that they actually have a team page now. I think it's these sort of step ups in. I think Josh just put it right.
The pushback is just like, how are we supposed to properly diligence this thing? And there's no way you possibly could have.
And that's good feedback, because maybe we can work on improving that. I think we've made a big jump on our website on SOAR, where you're able to upload all these artifacts where you can validate your website, right? So you're not hacked, etc. I'd love to speak with you guys more on how we can improve that.
Yeah, I think I'm a very optimistic person, and I think one of my big rules, which maybe I broke last week, was I don't want to be judging early stage things without talking to the founders, because this is truly what it is at that stage. But I do think more detail is
Cool.
ultimately what we're
No, I appreciate the feedback, and that's what I'm here for. I mean, I love talking to y'all. I love talking to everyone, right? We're trying to build out the product to be the best it can be. We wanted to feel like this early stage, like pre S&P opportunity for a lot of these companies. And I want investors to have the most detail possible.
I think you're going to find, to me, this, teams that have built something, that are in market with something, and see this as sort of like a benefit and go to market or something. Like, I feel like this is going to be the place where this model is most interesting, because I think teams will be a lot more like, it almost feels like this step in place for like maybe a WeFunder or a Republic, where you see teams being willing to come out with some of the disclosure requirements that exist there, to be a lot more clear about it. And if you put up a WeFunder Republic deal that's going through a Reg CF or something like that, like, they have to be very clear. Now, obviously, that limits the market in a big way, and I don't know if that is ultimately good for investors, because you might have some selection bias there that's not useful. But anyways, I think the whole thing's interesting. I don't want to take any more of your time here and leave our other guests waiting here, but yeah, I appreciate you hopping on. And I think every conversation that we've had before, I definitely left with the feeling that you're trying to do something good here and something big here. So I hope my criticism lands with the good intention that it's supposed to land in.
Totally.
And
but it comes because we're rooting for you, and we want nothing more.
I appreciate
and
that.
something like this to work.
Yeah.
Like, it's
we're trying our best. It's hard being a startup, man. I talk to a lot of people every day.
Especially a startup launching startups. That's
in the public even worse, right? I have to be like a VC and also recruiting people. It's tough. It's a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah.
All right, Tom. Well, yeah, we'll stoked to check back in with you as you continue to evolve this. It's a category we're very interested in, so we wish you big success.
Great, guys. I appreciate it, as always.
Thanks, man.